That year, Tiger Boss died in front of us. At that time, I saw Brother Shihei sitting on the deck crying uncontrollably. At that moment, I was thinking, if I could fight for Fisherman Island one day, I must win everything. The battle to fulfill my century-long dream is right in front of me, and I must consider whether this will be the only opportunity in my life. I believe that Fishman Island has suffered from discrimination over the past few hundred years, and the world government has played an indispensable role. Overthrowing the world government and creating the glory of fish people, our generation is bound to do so. Keywords of the novel. Pirates Fishman Glory No pop-ups, Pirates Fishman Glory TXT Complete Collection Download, Pirates Fishman Glory Latest Chapter Reading. Chapter 1. Octopus Man Brett. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1 Octopus Man Brett. In the latter half of the Great Voyage, in the sea area called the New World, there is an island called Punkhazad. This is an uninhabited island with undulating mountains. Although the island is covered in lush forests, it has always been deserted, and even due to its proximity to a naval base, even pirates are unwilling to land here. But in reality, this is only superficial. There is a huge experimental base underground on this island, which is the headquarters of the Navy Science Corps. Various cutting-edge research that is unknown to the outside world is quietly conducted here. Deep inside the base, in a room made of all metal, Brett was sweating profusely while doing squatting exercises. Brett looks very young, but in fact, he is also very young. He is only 16 years old this year, but he is already over 3 meters tall. Despite his tall and robust physique, he does not give the impression of being bloated at all. His skin is somewhat overly fair, which makes his tough appearance appear slightly softer. He seems to have been exercising for a long time, sweat has soaked all his clothes, but he still squats down and stands up like a machine. The reason for maintaining this movement is also very simple. He wears handcuffs on his hands and ankle shackles on his feet, so he can only do relatively simple exercises. Brett was not a researcher at this research base, on the contrary, he was brought here as the object of study. Call out. Finally, Brett's body reached its limit and he fell to the ground with a heavy sound. He gasped for breath and sat on the ground for a while before his breathing calmed down slightly. I don't know what's going on with Ah Long and his team. They shouldn't be feeling too well, after all, they're in the city of advancement. He leaned against the wall on his side, feeling a bit awkward, murmuring to himself. The reason for his awkwardness is that he has a sharp dorsal fin that penetrates through his clothes, making it impossible for him to fully lean his back against the wall. If you look closely, you can also find 3 cracks on each side of Brett's neck, with very sharp teeth and webbing between the faintly visible fingers. Really, do I still worry about their surplus? I'm already struggling to protect myself. Bright murmured softly. I'm afraid I'm the worst performer, right? This is something that only recently came to my mind. I turned out to be a traveler from a world completely different from this sea. And now in this world, it is a manga that I have been chasing since my past life. There really exists the concept of time travel in the world, and it's still time to travel into a world of comics. I can only say, it's really amazing. In this lifetime, Brett comes from a country that connects the first and second half of the Great Voyage, the island of mermaids 10,000 meters below the sea surface, where both the mermaids and the mermaids live. Strictly speaking, it is Fishman Street on Fishman Island, where Brett spent the first 13 years of his life. Brett is a fisherman, but not entirely. From his appearance, it can be seen that he is actually closer to humans than the fishman. He is a mixed race, or rather a half-fish man. One of his parents was a mermaid or a mermaid, giving him the bloodline of a mermaid, while the other gave him the bloodline of a human. He didn't know the specific division of labor, as he had never met before. But it doesn't matter either side, it doesn't affect the reality of him being abandoned on Fishman Street. That place is the most chaotic on Fishman Island. Originally an orphanage, it later became a gathering place for bad guys. Bright's special identity has suffered a lot here. Fortunately, the leader of Fishman Street, a man named Fisher Tiger, did not want to see a child with Fishman blood flowing on his body die in front of him. Brett spent his childhood through this and gradually gained the recognition of the fish people on Fishman Street with a slight physical advantage. He has been following behind several big brothers since he was very young, including Tiger, Shiping, and Arong, and of course, the one he admires the most is Tiger. So 3 years ago, when Tiger caused a big scene in Maria and returned to Fishman Island to form the Sun Pirates, at the age of 13, Bright chose to join without hesitation and became the youngest member on the ship. After 3 years of free sailing, the nightmare still appeared. I just wanted to send a child back to her hometown, but he was betrayed by the humans on that island, ambushed by the Navy, and died as a result. Blatt, who was filled with anger, chose to follow the enraged Aaron to retaliate against the humans on that island, only to encounter a certain man. A man who will soon receive the nickname Yellow Ape. Looking back at the shining light before his eyes that day, Bright still had lingering palpitations. That monster demonstrated overwhelming power. At that time, between life and death, the memories sealed due to reincarnation were finally completely unsealed. Brett remembered everything. But it's already too late, Big Brother Tiger has died, and he can't escape either. Everyone was arrested and then sent to push into the city. However, at that time, Brett, who had regained his past life memories, was not too worried about this matter. Because he knew that in no more than a year's effort, Shihei would agree to the government's request to become the new 7 Marshal Seas, and in exchange, all arrested members of the Sun Pirates would be released. Advancing the city is not a good place, but if it's only a year, Brett is confident that he can make it through. However, just as we arrived at the advancing city, an unexpected situation occurred. All the fishmen were escorted off the ship to push into the city, except for Brett. "Someone is very interested in your bloodline," said the Yellow Ape. And then he brought Brett here. Bright didn't expect that the power he relied on in the past would actually become a stumbling block for him. His bloodline is indeed somewhat unique. Brett is a giant-toothed shark fish man. In this world, the giant-toothed shark is also an ancient fish that disappeared from the sea a long time ago. However, unlike in previous lives, the giant-toothed shark in this world is said to be even larger. It is a super sea king with a body size exceeding 1 kilometer, and was the sea lord who dominated Qinghai in ancient times. However, although the giant-toothed shark has disappeared, the mermaids and mermaids have inherited the bloodline of all fish. The newborns on the island of mermaids have random bloodlines, and the bloodlines of mermaids and mermaids contain the bloodline of all fish from ancient times. The same pair of mermaids or mermaid parents often give birth to children with completely different bloodlines, and all bloodlines hidden deep within the body may awaken. Brett is very lucky. His half of the Fishman lineage is the giant-toothed shark that has not appeared on the island for a long time. As a half-fisherman, he was able to grow up well on Fisherman Street, and his lineage has been a great help. There are also differences between fish people, and the giant-toothed shark is certainly one of the top bloodlines among all fish people. The average strength of an ordinary fish man is 10 times that of an ordinary human, and Brett himself is about 10 times that of an ordinary fish man. After years of training, he can definitely be called a little superhero-like existence. It is with this power that he was able to stand firm in the Sun Pirates. But now, also because of this power, he is being targeted by a guy named Bega Punk, who wants to glimpse the power of ancient times from Brett's bloodline. So now Brett is being held here. It has been over 3 months now. In the past 3 months, he has been very calm. When the Navy delivers food, he eats it. Whenever he does, he silently exercises. When research requires his cooperation, he cooperates honestly. The Navy's attitude towards him gradually relaxed. So, shouldn't that be enough? Brett plans to do something. He doesn't want his life to stop in this base. He took a shower in the bathroom provided in this cell and then lay on the bed in a daze. Time gradually passes by. Tonight's fish feed. The delivery port below the tightly closed metal door opened, and the Navy outside handed in a plate filled with food, and casually took back the empty plate that Brett had left at the door. Brett stood up. Because of his ankle shackles, he couldn't even take too big a step, but at least it wasn't so big that he could only jump and jump. Walking to the door and picking up the plate, Bright sat back on the bedside wall and started eating dinner. The food can be said to be abundant, with a few toasted fragrant white bread, paired with a few large pieces of equally fragrant grilled meat, followed by a bowl of vegetable salad and a bowl of meat soup, and finally a large bottle of water. Balanced nutrition and sufficient calories. It's hard to imagine this being prepared for prisoners. There is no trace of human discrimination against fish people. But Brett knew that there was only one reason he would receive such treatment, and that guy Bergapunk didn't want to suffer from malnutrition. Just like raising a little white mouse to be white and chubby. But Brett doesn't care, isn't it a bad thing? Anyway, it's already like this. It's better to have something delicious than nothing. However, Brett did not finish his meal. In the past, even licking the plate clean could only be considered as 80% full of food. Tonight, Brett ate more and more slowly, and in the end, he frowned and locked his face, leaving half of the food. Brett seemed to be feeling very uncomfortable, so he finally placed the plate at the door, turned off the light and lay back in bed. He tossed and turned in bed, covering his stomach with a worried expression on his face. After about half an hour of this, Bright couldn't sleep and got out of bed to exercise. He got up, turned on the light, stood upside down in the middle of the room, and began doing upside-down push-ups. This took over an hour until Bright was sweating profusely again. Then, Brett's body, which was as stable as Mount Tai, shook for a while. Then, suddenly, his body fell to the ground with a thud. Brett's expression became extremely twisted, and with the sweat all over his body, he looked very ferocious. His body was bent like a shrimp, and his muscles were trembling as he covered his stomach with both hands. He turned his head to look at a corner of the room, then turned back forcefully, gritting his teeth tightly, but didn't make a sound. It looks like a sudden onset of illness. Newcomer's new book, please take good care of it. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Brett's Redemption. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Brett's Redemption. At the same time, in a certain room of this base, which is the main monitoring room of this base, all the scenes captured by the large number of surveillance phone worms installed in the base are summarized here. Although it was already late at night, there were still several Navy officers on duty in the monitoring room, yawning and watching the surveillance to prevent any unexpected situations from happening. Then, an unexpected situation occurred. What's going on? What's wrong with that fishman? A scream shattered the silent atmosphere. The originally tired navies instantly regained consciousness and gathered behind the noisy Navy. The Navy pointed at the surveillance screen and said, "It seemed a bit uncomfortable before. Just now, while exercising, I suddenly fell to the ground." "Are you sick?" some people speculate. "Can it be pretending?" said a certain Navy skeptically. "Not quite." He glanced at the phone worm, but it didn't seem like he had any intention of seeking help from us. This guy has been very calm for the past few months. He should know what it means to cause trouble. The fish man sounds very powerful, but it's just an inferior race. "How dare he oppose the government?" said a Navy officer in a relaxed tone. "You're right, let someone take a look quickly. The doctor won't allow him to have any problems. I'll go call someone right away." Bright on the screen seemed to have lost consciousness and stopped moving. If it weren't for his chest still undulating, it would have been like a corpse. Bright lay quietly on the cold ground, but his body was as hot as flames. His heart was beating at lightning speed, forcefully and continuously sending blood to every corner of his body. Although it was the most passionate moment, his mood was very calm. Of course he was not sick, and Bergapunk did not conduct any heinous experiments on him, that is, drawing blood, collecting some skin tissue or hair. If we only study Bloodline, these are enough. The appearance at this moment is of course just a disguise. I endured for 3 months just for this moment. This method is very cliché and not very clever, but it should come in handy. It is impossible for the Navy to relax to the point where they are completely unprepared against him. All they need to do is make them not as fully guarded as they were at the beginning. Even reducing the difficulty from 100 to 99 is worth it. G. Bright heard the sound of the heavy metal door opening. It came quickly, so there shouldn't be enough time to go to the medical department to find a doctor. Very good news. The moment I have been waiting for is now. The extremely tense and excited mood further stimulated the secretion of adrenaline, but at this moment, Bright felt an unprecedented calmness. Footsteps sounded. 1, 2, 3, are there 7 people coming in? 4 people stopped at the door, only 3 approached. Bang! Brett felt a heavy kick on his arm. It hurts a bit. Then the hair was roughly grabbed, the head was pulled up, and the right eye was stretched open. Brett worked hard to relax his pupils, so that his eyes did not tremble at all. Since there is no doctor, he is not worried. What is the pupil of a fish man like? Is this a normal appearance? A voice sounded, with a somewhat impatient expression. I don't know, but Captain, motionless, it seems that he has indeed passed out, replied a voice. Is it just a captain? It seems that the disguise over the past 3 months has yielded results. It's really troublesome, sleeping soundly. Damn the fish man, don't worry about him and let him die, okay? I won't smell the fishy smell anymore, said another voice. Don't say stupid things, he is an important experimental material for the doctor. If you die, he cannot die. Anyway, quickly lift him onto a stretcher and send him to the medical department. The voice called the captain scolded. Damn it, the fishman smells very bad. You wouldn't get any diseases from him, would you? So didn't you wear gloves? Brett heard several conversations from the Navy, then he was lifted up and roughly thrown onto a stretcher. This guy is really heavy. 2 more people to help. 2 of the 4 navies guarding the door came over, and then the 4 of them worked together. Bright felt like he was being lifted into mid-air. Then, finally, he began to move outside this cell. Bright silently calculated in his heart. The navies began to turn, so they had already left the cell door. There seemed to be several navies leading the way at the entrance. 4 of them. So, the total number of people is 11. Is it a patrol team? Can you vaguely hear the sound of metal collisions? They are carrying weapons, and indeed their vigilance has not been let down. But it's already enough, the true senior officers of the scientific army are already enough without coming over. The Navy was chatting, and Brett tensed his nerves. Turn left. Then, turn right. Go straight ahead. Turn right again. So, that should be it here. The bathhouse at the base is one of the few places in the base where surveillance cameras are not installed for privacy reasons. The memory of being taken to the medical department for a physical examination before has finally come in handy. Finally, to confirm, there are a total of 11 enemies. The 4 people leading the way in front and the 2 people following behind must be holding weapons. The 4 people carrying stretchers should not be able to spare their hands. So the most crucial thing is the naval captain walking beside him. Based on previous observations, the commander of each patrol team should carry a telephone worm for communication and alarm purposes, which can be pressed to activate the entire naval base. So, cough, cough, cough. Bright suddenly opened his eyes, his body trembling, and he began to cough violently, and his head began to twitch. Due to his movements, the 4 navies carrying stretchers shook. What's going on? The naval captain with a thick beard frowned and leaned over. Hey, Fishman, what's wrong with you? The naval captain was slightly stunned as he saw Brett's fierce expression suddenly calm down. Oh no. The captain's face began to change. But he didn't make any sound, and Bright's broad left hand had already grabbed his neck. Fishman karate. Rough shark. Brett's left muscle swelled, and his fingers seemed to be made of steel, unexpectedly sinking into the neck of a naval captain. During my more than 10 years in Fishman Street and 3 years in the Sun Pirates, besides exercising, I have never fallen behind in combat skills. This naval captain couldn't even scream because his neck was choked, and his muscles and bones were twisted, making a creepy creaking sound. Captain. A navy carrying a stretcher had already screamed. After a brief moment of shock, the 6 armed navies finally remembered their responsibilities and lifted their firearms. Brett has a strong physique, and he doesn't even need to aim at such a distance. He can't even block a gun with a naval captain. And he won't be domineering either. Although he has great strength, he is just a mortal body and can't block bullets. So he jumped up from the stretcher, raised his left arm high, lifted the naval captain, and then smashed at the 4 sailors in front. It was like playing bowling, and the 4 navies were directly thrown out, rolling like gourds and forming a ball. Originally, under the constraints of handcuffs and ankle shackles, Bright could not perform such intense movements. But at the same time as he jumped up, the chains of handcuffs and ankle shackles broke simultaneously. A Navy officer carrying a stretcher but falling directly to the ground due to Brett's actions looked at the scene incredulously. That's a chain made of special alloy. Even giants are hard to break free from. Bright's lips carried a cheerful smile. So it's not yesterday, nor the day before yesterday, nor the day before yesterday, but today. Don't underestimate shark teeth. Whenever I turn off the lights at night, I curl up silently, quietly, without disturbing anyone. It took me 3 months to grind my teeth bit by bit, smoothing out 107 pairs of teeth, and finally breaking free from the constraints on my body. There were water droplets oozing from Brett's hands, and he just casually shook them. Strike water. In the next moment, the 2 naval bodies in the rear were directly thrown backwards. They had a small hole pierced through their chest, as if they had been pierced by a large caliber gun. Brett landed, his sturdy legs exerting force and his body bouncing out. The sailors who were just thrown away by the naval captain didn't have time to get up, and their huge fists were already coming towards them. Bang 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 bang. After a slight movement of his body, Brett turned around and saw the 4 navies who were originally carrying stretchers pulling out their weapons. Their movements were a bit trembling, even making mistakes when loading the gun. I'm afraid. Finally, it's not as condescending as before. Strike water. Before listing, it is customary to change twice a day. Please support us. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Fruits. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Fruits. Fishman karate and fishman jutsu are both techniques for manipulating water. Brett couldn't easily unleash shockwaves that could penetrate giants and throw water droplets that were more powerful than shells like Shihei, but it was quite easy to give water droplets the power of bullets when taken seriously. Blood flowed in this wide corridor. Brett remained silent, not deliberately attacking the vital points of these navies, but also not deliberately avoiding them. In his past life, he was just an ordinary person and never killed a single chicken from childhood to Dalian. But in this life, he grew up in the Fishman Street where bad kids were everywhere, a fierce and violent shark. He took a step forward and stepped on one hand, the one reaching out towards the foam worm that had fallen to the side. Bright looked down at his naval captain with a flushed face and unwillingness. Is it an iron block? No wonder the neck is so hard. You, surprisingly, so strong. The captain's voice was hoarse with disbelief. It's just that it wasn't time to showcase before. Brett kicked the captain's chest fiercely, causing the man to hit the wall like a shell. The special metal walls were slightly dented by the impact. Now it's even. Brett took a deep breath. The first step of the plan was perfectly completed, without a doctor coming to avoid getting into trouble while in prison, which shortened the distance by a long distance. The next thing to do is to rush straight to the port of the base, jump into the sea, and then no one can stop you anymore. Who can stop the fish man in the sea? I should be grateful to the builders of this base. They built it too large and complex, which made it easy for even internal personnel to get lost. Therefore, they could only carve topographic maps in certain key locations. Now, it's time for it to come in handy. Bright is moving his body. After rushing out from here, there will be no chance to catch a breath, and one must take a breath to reach the finish line. Otherwise, everything will be over. After recalling the memories of his past life, Brett actually had no major ambitions. He originally just wanted to spend a year in the advancing city, then go back to Fisherman Island to find a job and learn the gas dominance technique with shiping. He waited until the Straw Hat Kid set sail and the Revolutionary Army overthrew the Tianlong people. Anyway, Joey Boy will eventually fulfill the agreement he made with the Mermaid Princess 800 years ago, right? But unfortunately, he was brought here. I don't want to die in prison, let alone be quietly dealt with by the government after losing value. So, he chose to resist. Unfortunately, his body size is too large, and these navy clothes are not suitable for him. Otherwise, his actions may be much simpler. Brett took a few steps forward and slowly breathed a sigh of relief, constantly recalling the base structure map he had seen before in his mind. Then, he lowered his body and took a deep breath. Preparation. The muscles throughout the body have already tightened. Run. The explosive force erupted, causing Brett's tall body to transform into a silhouette and fly forward. In the blink of an eye, he had already rushed out of the bathhouse area, in other words, re-entered the surveillance area. Bright shook his hands repeatedly, and all the surveillance foam worms along the way were smashed by him with water droplets. But limited to this area that he is more familiar with. Continuing to run forward, this area is the only one he has seen on the construction map. He couldn't rule out the surveillance phone bug in the first place. Even at the corner ahead, there was a team of naval patrols coming straight in. You are. Seeing Brett rushing towards them, the Navy was a bit confused as they were not sure what the situation was. The sole of the shark's palm. The water concentrated in his legs and then turned into explosive force. Bright swept up into the sky like a shadow, and then stepped on the ceiling to turn with force when the sailors had no reaction at all. The next second, he had already hit the naval formation like a shell. 3,000 tile spinning kicks. Like a tornado passing by, the Navy was swept by the storm and turned into falling leaves dancing in the sky. Brett didn't stop at all and strode forward. It's not that far anymore. Let's take a gamble now, who is faster between the reaction speed of the scientific army and their own movement speed. In the surveillance room, the Navy finally realized something was wrong. That fishman. He ran away. Damn it. Something's wrong. This guy's target is the port. Notify the control room and lower the blocking gate. Quickly report to your superiors and stop him before he escapes into the sea. The sharp alarm sound tore apart the silent night at the base, and the flashing red light made everyone nervous. Strike the water. Bright threw a series of water droplets and flew the last few navies in front of him. But he showed no signs of happiness. This is the 5th patrol team he has defeated. The time interval between their appearances is getting shorter and shorter. No wonder my whereabouts are always exposed, the longer I drag on, the more people stop in front of me. The sole of the shark's palm. Water is once again gathering in both legs. This explosive move was not originally intended for rushing, but now it's too much to handle. Bright rushed forward like lightning. The 17th team has been defeated. The 9th and 13th teams have been defeated. Damn it, even Major Konitz has been defeated. Don't worry, he can't escape. The iron wall is waiting for him ahead. Hoo. Brett was panting heavily, his right hand covering his left shoulder, where there was a relatively deep blood hole bleeding. Not only that, but he also had many injuries on his body. There were more and more enemies surrounding him, becoming stronger and stronger. Just now, I encountered a guy who was proficient in the 3 and 6 styles. When I was surrounded, I was a bit careless and he used his finger gun to make a hole in his shoulder. Fortunately, they managed to escape unscathed in the end. Passing through the temporary warehouse ahead is the port. Brett took a deep breath and pushed open the warehouse door. Shoot! A loud roar came from behind the door. Then there was a stormy crackling sound. Brett hid far from the door, watching helplessly as the wall outside was turned into a hornet's nest. I knew there must be an ambush. There are at least hundreds of people in this firepower. When the gunshot stopped for a while, Bright quickly jumped over and extended his head to take a look. Just a glance, and then he ran without looking back, without any intention of stopping. The warehouse is filled with Navy personnel. Behind them, the gate leading to the port has been closed. In front of the navies stood a man, dressed in a coat of justice and carrying the rank of Major General on his shoulders. We can't win, it's absolutely impossible to make a positive breakthrough. Damn it, we can only execute Plan B. I can only take a gamble. Brett worked hard to recall the construction map of the base and began the second round of escape. In the monitoring room. What's going on? That guy ran back. Damn it, do you realize you can't break through the encirclement? Quickly notify superiors not to mobilize troops towards the port anymore, that guy is moving towards other areas. The navies quickly adjusted their direction, this time it's not just a small fuss. Each unit is led by colonel-level officers, consisting of hundreds of people. Bright is well aware that with the passage of time, the naval forces surrounding him will become increasingly powerful, so he must use his brain. He did not directly move towards the target, searching for the surveillance phone worms that were destroying the way, while starting to circle around. When the phone worms had damaged a lot, he began to retreat. Damn it! I can't see that guy anymore. Where did he hide? It's okay, we've already surrounded that area. He can't escape with his wings inserted. Brett knew that even if he temporarily withdrew from surveillance, the Navy quickly compressed this space to zero and he had no time to breathe. But it's already enough. Bright turned around and headed towards his true destination. More Navy should have been lured in another direction, right? When Brett reappeared in the surveillance, the Navy in the control room was surprised. What's going on? Why is that guy heading towards the depths of the base? It's okay. Colonel Ronald is nearby. He can't escape. Brett ran hard, counting as he moved forward. Then, finally, just as he was very close to his destination, a Navy team stopped in front. Stop. That's it, Fishman. The naval colonel holding a long sword shouted, "You have nowhere to escape, let's take it." Behind him, hundreds of Navy soldiers aimed their guns at Brett. Without any hesitation, Brett burst out with all his might and raced forward. He is gambling. He made the right bet. Damn it. The Navy colonel gritted his teeth and said, "Don't shoot. Draw your sword. Get him. This fish man is an important experimental material for Dr. Bergapunk." The Navy drew their swords and, led by the colonel, charged towards Bright. Shave. Bright only felt a flash in his eyes, as the naval colonel had already appeared in front of him in an instant, mercilessly stabbing towards him. So fast. Brett gritted his teeth, in the true sense of gritting his teeth. He opened his mouth wide and took a bite towards the attacking blade. Click. A crisp sound. What? The colonel's face suddenly changed. His sword was actually bitten open by this guy. Although it's not a famous sword, it's also a top-dot quality one that has been honed through countless trials and tribulations. He didn't know that sharks were most proud of their bite force. 3,000 tile fists. Blocking the colonel's knife, Bright punched him in the stomach. Iron block. The tactile sensation was like hitting steel, but the colonel was directly thrown away, hitting the side wall like a shell. Brett didn't even care about the naval colonel, so he repeated his old trick and jumped up, relay on the wall on one side of the corridor, directly crossing over the Navy who dared not shoot, and then running rapidly forward. Ah! The colonel, who fell to the ground, covered his chest and his face turned pale with blood flowing uncontrollably from the corners of his mouth. This guy has such terrifying power. But he immediately wiped his blood and angrily said, "Chase up." Bright ran all the way forward. The navies are all curious, where exactly does he want to go? The further you go inside, the less escape there is. And soon, something surprising happened to them. Bright arrived in front of a certain gate. He pushed open the door and walked in, then he locked the door from inside. Finally arrived. Hey! That's a place for collecting discarded items, isn't it? Yes, Doctor, all the failed products are here. Is that guy's destination here? Does he want to use the props inside to escape? That idiot, there are all useless failed items inside. If it weren't for the things that the doctor had thrown into the garbage dump to commemorate. There is no monitoring phone worm installed inside, so we cannot confirm the situation inside. It's okay, it's closed inside and he has nowhere to escape. Let's break through head on after gathering some more people. The Navy felt that the victory was already in their hands. Brett locked the door and didn't have time to scrutinize the scene in the room. He started searching. Without much effort, he quickly found what he was looking for on a platform in the corner of the room. That is a fruit casually placed here. It's fiery red with a skin that looks like scales. I won the bet. It's really here. Thank you to the two experts, It's Raining Heavily Today and Winter Evening Breeze, for their 100-point reward. Thank you. In addition, we have already signed a contract and request counting of tickets to support our oral communication. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Bega Punk. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Bega Punk. Bright picked up this fiery red fruit. This is certainly a demonic fruit. But it's not just a typical demon fruit. This is an artificial demon fruit, and it is very likely to be the first artificial demon fruit in the world. After Brett was sent here, no one revealed the name and address of the place to him. But he knows where this is, he knows it's the government's secret experimental base, an island called Punk Hazad. So, this fruit should be here. Crafted by Bergapunk himself and based on the bloodline factor of Kaido, this replica of the mythical beast species Qinglong fruit. Although Bergapunk believed that the fruit had failed, Bright knew that perhaps it was not so. The peach that ate this fruit by chance in the future shows the same ability as the original copy of Kado. It is highly likely not a failed product. Of course, it is also possible that Tao Zhizhu is truly a chosen person, possessing a special bloodline that revives this failed fruit and possesses abilities comparable to the original version. But now Brett can't handle that much either. After the failed attempt to reach the port, there was already no way out. The so-called Plan B is just a gamble on luck. What if this fruit hasn't been made yet by Bega Punk? What if this fruit wasn't placed in this room? What if this room is heavily guarded and cannot be accessed? If he could just jump into the sea and escape, how could he come here to try his luck? If possible, as a fish man, how could he eat devil's fruit? Still not sure if there are any useful artificial demon fruits. Brett is not a clever plan, he is just at a loss. Fortunately, it seems that the goddess of luck is standing on his side today. Now let's see if the goddess of luck is willing to give her the last favor. Brett wiped the dust off the fruit, opened his mouth wide, and took a bite. When the fruit flesh entered his mouth, Bright couldn't help but frown. The certification of the Straw Hat Boy is unpleasant, and its value is indeed high enough. The fruit flesh is neither crispy nor soft and sticky, so sticky that it feels like swallowing nasal mucus in the mouth. It sticks in the mouth and cannot be chewed thoroughly. Not to mention the taste, the dishes made by Long are hundreds of times more delicious than it. Brett exhausted his vocabulary and found it difficult to find suitable adjectives to describe this taste. But now is not the time to be coquettish. Bright put in a lot of effort and swallowed the entire fruit in a few bites. What if the quality control of artificial demon fruits is not strict enough, and you cannot obtain abilities without eating them all? So, Goddess of Luck, once again, lend me your luck. Brett took a deep breath. Whether it's becoming a fish man who can't swim for nothing, or having the power of a mythical beast and getting a chance to escape from life, it's up to now. At the same time, there were more and more navies outside the door, and even the rear admiral who had previously blocked the door had arrived here. The Dark Navy blocked the passage completely. Prepare for a strong attack. Major General solemnly said, Colonel and above, follow me and try to save that guy's life. Yes. The naval generals nodded in unison. The Major General's hand has been pressed onto the hilt of the sword at his waist. For him, who has mastered his dominance, the heavy metal gate in front of him is nothing. Wait a minute. However, at this moment, a slightly drowsy voice suddenly came from behind the crowd. The Navy froze for a moment, then turned around in unison and made way. Doctor. The rear admiral looked at the man slowly walking along the road that the navies had given way to and said in surprise, Why did you come? The newcomer has messy hair and a tall figure. He is a middle-aged man wearing a pair of big glasses. Wearing a white coat paired with a T-shirt and jeans, it looks very casual. He doesn't have an astonishing appearance, but even His Excellency, the Major General, has great respect for him. Because his name is Bega Punk. That kid escaped into my storage room, of course I have to come and take a look. What else would you do if you destroyed my treasures? Said Bega Punk with a strange smile on his face. The Major General smiled bitterly and said, Doctor, aren't those all failures? It's because it's a failed product that it's a treasure. Bega Punk said naturally, for me, failure is more commemorative than success. Major General is helpless. This doctor is indeed qualified to say such words. The failures born in his hands are indeed much less than successes. Doctor, what do you want to do? The leader of the entire naval science force, of course, is the chief scientist of the government in front of him. It's really interesting to think of using my collection to find a chance to turn things around when I'm at a loss. Let me go in and talk to him, Bega Punk said with a smile. Doctor, are you serious? Major General was stunned. Are you questioning me? Bega Punk gave him a sidelong glance. No, I dare not. The Major General can only smile bitterly. Doctor, no matter what, you are a civil servant. Behind that heavy metal gate. Brett sat on a platform originally used for storing things, looking up at the ceiling above. Punch through the top, then chisel through the entire mountain, and open the door to go out and pierce through all the navy blocking the way. Which one is simpler? There was a calm smile on the corner of his mouth. Shoo. At this moment, a sharp sound echoed through the crack in the gate over there. Are you cutting the door lock? Brett stood up and walked to the side of the door to avoid being caught in a wave of fire after the door opened. He took a deep breath. Then, fire-red scales emerged from the skin, and the legs gradually turned into a cross-jointed shape. A thick tail grew behind the buttocks, and most importantly, 2 pairs of sharp horns on the forehead twisted and grew. Brett has become a fiery red tall dragon man. The goddess of luck once again favored him. That demon fruit was indeed successful, Brett can now announce so loudly. After gaining the ability, Brett underwent a completely new transformation. The strength and physique have greatly increased, and the resilient dragon scales have even made Brett confident that he can withstand bullets, and even his shoulder injury is almost healed. More importantly, although he can't swim anymore, now he can fly. I have truly possessed the ability to escape from heaven. Brett's palm once again oozed water and was ready to go. Click. The door lock was finally sawn off and pushed open. Brett held his breath. Kid, don't rush to take action. I'm the only one, come and chat. A sound came from outside the door, and then a man walked in. Brett paused for a moment and said, Bega Punk. The person who walked into the door was Bega Punk, although he had not met twice, of course Brett could not forget the appearance of this guy. How did this guy come? And he actually turned around and closed the door. What exactly does the Navy think? After closing the door, Bergapunk turned around and saw Brett at that moment. Oh. The man's eyes lit up in an instant, and he quickly ran up to Brett, almost obsessively observing him. Did you eat that fruit? Ha ha ha, is that you who it's waiting for? Oh, it's fiery red. I thought it would be a little softer. Brett was stunned for a moment. What does it mean? What is the person it's waiting for? Is it difficult? This guy already knows that this fruit hasn't failed. But now these are not important anymore. Brett looked at Bergapunk in front of him and felt secretly happy. Even with the ability, one must go through a bloody battle in order to escape, and it is even possible that one cannot escape. But now the opportunity has come. As long as we can capture Bergapunk and take him as a hostage, it will be easy to leave here. I was just trying to make you feel more at ease, but now it seems. Huh, kid, as Brett was about to take action, Bergapunk suddenly said, how about making a deal? What? Thank you for the 400-point reward from the Shitsuan big shot, and thank you for the 1500-point reward from the 2 big shots of Yuzuan uranium and disappearing Mediterranean. Thank you, thank you. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Vegapunk's Trading. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5 Vegapunk's Trading Transaction. What is this guy suddenly saying? Brett must admit that Bergapunk's brainless remarks really left him confused. What are the good deals between them? And what kind of transaction are you talking about so far? Now all you need to do is catch this guy and escape from here. Although confused by Bergapunk's speech, Brett did not hesitate and grabbed him directly. This government chief scientist, who has been leading the world in technology for 500 years, will have his own life-saving talisman in the future. Pop. Bergapunk casually raised his hand and slapped Brett's paw away, saying somewhat disdainfully, you don't like to listen to people, do you? Brett widened his eyes in shock. His slap on his hand made him almost unconscious. The scales that were originally confident enough to withstand bullets seemed to be of no use at all. Even being easily cracked, my body spun around with my arms. Naughty kid, Vijayapunk didn't pay any attention to Brett's reaction. He casually pulled over a table to put things and sat down, his tone slightly impatient. Okay, then let's talk about the consequences of you escaping from here. Blatt took 2 steps back in shock and distanced himself from Bergapunk. Is this guy really a researcher? What's going on with that force? Bright was wary in his heart, but he said, the Dragon Palace Kingdom is a government member country, and Fishman Island is the territory of the Whitebeard pirates. The government will not launch a full-scale attack on Fishman Island for me, an unknown person. Perhaps Fishman Island doesn't matter to the government, but the Whitebeard pirates are different. They are opponents that the government also needs to be fully mentally prepared to face. Since there won't be anything wrong with Fishman Island, I don't believe the government can catch me as a fishman in the sea. Although I can't swim now, I can fly. Indeed, that's right. It seems that you're not completely brainless. Bergapunk jumped onto the platform and squatted down, then the corners of the world's first scientist's mouth curved upwards, with a mocking smile on his face. But what should those fishmen in the advancing city do? Brett's expression froze. Yes, Long and his team are still locked up in the advancing city. Although Long is a scumbag, no, a fish scumbag in the original work, He really has nothing to say about his fellow countrymen. Before restoring his memory, he received a lot of care from him. He is only inferior to Big Brother Tiger in terms of being a big brother, and even on par with him. And also, Bergapunk is right. If they choose to escape, there may not be any problem with Fishman Island, but they will be unlucky. But Brett felt a bit ashamed that he had never seriously considered their matter before. Or, to put it another way, hold a lucky mentality in your heart that, shouldn't this involve them? Bright sighed. Tell me about your transaction details, Doctor. Anyway, the situation is already like this, so it doesn't matter if you spend an extra half-minute listening to Bergapunk's advice. Great. Believe me, kid, you won't regret it, Vegapunk said as he raised his glasses, almost beaming with joy. I can give you some news in advance that the government has been in contact with the new captain of your Sun Pirates, a guy named Shihei. According to my estimation, when he becomes the new 7 Armed Seas, it will be the time when you arrested guys regain your freedom. He smiled and said, although your exposure to government classified agencies is theoretically unrelated to that, it would be different if you had my approval. So, what should I pay for it? Said Bright, nodding calmly. This kid is quite calm. The thing you need to do is very simple, and that's to cooperate with my research, said Vegapunk with great interest. Research? Bright's eyes sank. He doesn't have any interest in studying his own body. Don't rush to refuse, this should be a very beneficial study for you. Bergapunk took off his glasses and let out a sigh. He casually pulled up one corner of his white coat and wiped his glasses, squinting his eyes to look somewhat kind. Do you know what kind of devil fruit you've eaten? Brett shook his head as if he knew nothing. I'm not sure, but I think it should be a very powerful fruit. Ha ha ha, thank you very much for your praise. Vegapunk laughed heartily and put on his glasses again. That's the artificial demon fruit I created based on the bloodline factor of the beast Kaido. Artificial devil fruit. Amazing. Bright tried to show a perfectly surprised expression, so, my ability is a replica of the green dragon form of the Kaido phantom beast. Ha ha ha, you really don't like listening to people talk, do you? Vegapunk's smile was mocking, didn't I say it? It's based on Kaido's bloodline factor, not his abilities. Bright's face stiffened for a moment. Is it as I understand it? If you have to say anything, you should be the fruit power of Kaido, right? Bergapunk smiled brilliantly. According to blood relations, why should you call Kaido father? Brother? Hey, Kaido should be very happy to suddenly know that he has an additional family member by blood, right? Happy. If that monster knew about this, perhaps the first thing they would do was fly over and make a thunderous gossip, turning themselves into meat sauce. How could that guy allow someone to have the same abilities as him? Not to mention, his own ability was born from his shameful past. So, Doctor, do you mean that besides obtaining the same abilities as Kaido, would I also gain a monster like Kaido? However, Brett was still a little excited. In this case, the gains are much greater than imagined. Although there is a high probability of being targeted by Kaido in the future, it is definitely worth it. Kaido is enough to be on par with Charlotte Lingling, a true-born monster. His physique is second to none in the world. If this fruit, along with Kaido's innate physique, could be replicated, that would be too strong. So it seems that in the original work, Tao Jiju is really the chosen son. He should be considered to have inherited the bloodlines of both monsters at the same time, right? That's right, that's right. Bergapunk nodded naturally. It's really amazing. Bright gave a heartfelt compliment. But don't be too happy too early, Bergapunk added. The growth of the body still takes time. The transformation of bloodline factors and the acquisition of abilities are different, and it takes little by little to complete. Moreover, the final effect depends on whether it is suitable or not. Is that so? Brett was somewhat disappointed. However, it doesn't matter. Anyway, my goal is just to wait with peace of mind for the Straw Hat team to change the world and have the power to protect myself. So, Doctor, what is the research you're talking about? Asked Bright. Vegapunk did not conceal anything about this fruit, it seemed to be very sincere. Brett's wary heart relaxed slightly, and it didn't matter if he listened. Let's give it a try, how about making you stronger? Vegapunk jumped down and walked up to Brett. His excited cheeks turned red, which made Brett unconsciously take a step back. This guy's eyes were so terrifying now. I have incorporated Kato's bloodline factor into this fruit, so why can't I incorporate more bloodline factors? Brett didn't speak. He is completely clueless about this matter. The bloodline factor is a wonderful thing. Vegapunk opened his arms and turned back in circles. In our human lineage, there are traces of our evolution over millions of years, but the vast majority of them are useless and redundant parts that we have discarded over time. They have all died. He suddenly stopped spinning and put on an agile posture, with his left leg raised high and his right hand pointing towards Brett. But you fish people are different, he said. Your lineage factor records information about all your ancestors, all of which are active. Every newly born mermaid or mermaid will randomly activate a type of ancestor's lineage. So, since you have fused the bloodline factor of Kaido, why can't you activate multiple bloodlines at the same time? How many bloodlines are there? What a brilliant idea. However, Brett imagined himself having several bloodlines at the same time, such as the arms of an octopus, the mouth of a kissing fish, and the nose of a swordfish. Will it become a monster? He couldn't help but say. That's the key to the problem. The conflict between different bloodline factors can cause the body to collapse, just like the devil's fruit can only be eaten by one, said Vegapunk as he changed his position and turned his body sideways, his hands wrapped around his chest and squinted at Brett. He paused and said, but using the ability you have obtained as a mediator is different, just like Kato's bloodline factor. Incorporating bloodline factors into the ability can avoid such conflicts. Ability. Is there actually such a function? Or is the fruit made by Vegapunk special? Brett hesitated for a moment and asked, Doctor, what kind of existence is devil fruit ability? Hey, this is a very dangerous secret, you better not know. Vegapunk gave a strange smile, his neck tilted and his head almost parallel to the ground, looking at Brett. You just need to answer me, do you want to join my research? In that ancient era before the emergence of intelligent creatures, there were many monsters living in the sea. As their descendants, don't you want to experience their power, kid? I have to admit, I was tempted. Brett thought for a moment and said, so, Doctor, there are two more questions. Why do you want to help me become stronger, and why do I believe in you? Why? Of course, it's because this research is very interesting. As for the second question, Brett saw a teasing smile on the doctor's face and said, Kid, do you think you can leave without my permission? Brett's mouth sinks. Thank you to the two big shots of .529_ and Tattoo 365 for their 100-point reward, and thank you to the two big shots of Shitsuan and Shirshi for their 1500-point reward. Thank you, thank you. Unexpectedly, the great god Baki has truly become the fourth emperor, and it is true that he cannot guess the little brain of Oda. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Minor Conflicts. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6 Minor Conflicts. What exactly is the doctor doing inside? Outside the heavy metal gate, the Major General held his sword with a somewhat solemn expression. It's been several minutes. The first time I felt that the sound insulation was done too well was a bad thing. What exactly happened inside? Doctor, there won't be any trouble, will there? Although the strength of that fishman cannot do anything to the doctor, what if? Any risk is unbearable, and if that doctor encounters any problems, his political life can be declared over, and it is not surprising to be thrown directly into the city of advancement. The Major General's face changed and he felt a bit tempted to launch a strong attack. Squeak. Fortunately, at this moment, the heavy metal door was opened, and Bergapunk walked out slowly with his hands behind his back. Doctor. The Major General was overjoyed and breathed a sigh of relief in an instant. Fortunately, nothing happened. Vegapunk nodded as a greeting, then turned back and said, "Kid, come out, are you still shy?" Brett slowly walked out of the door. He has put away his abilities and returned to his usual state. The fruit created by Bergapunk did not fail, and he successfully obtained that ability. For now, let the government not know. Major General flashed behind Bergapunk in an instant, and the blade in his hand was already directly placed on Brett's neck. Bright remained motionless, neither avoiding nor panicking, but even so, his pupils contracted slightly. What a fast speed! I can't even react. He's really a terrible guy. The decision just now was absolutely correct. In a direct confrontation with this guy, I had no chance of winning at that time. Doctor, what should this guy do? The Brigadier General didn't turn his head back and looked at Brett with alert eyes. Brett was certain that if he made any abnormal movements, this guy's sword would mercilessly cut his neck. I have already talked to this kid, and he will be calm next. Take him back, whatever happened before and after. Bergapunk said casually, he's a very important experimental material for me. Doctor, are you serious? In the rear, a naval colonel couldn't help but shout loudly, because of this guy's actions, more than 10 navies have died in battle, and as a result, more than 100 have been injured. Brett had some impression of him as the last opponent he faced before entering the treasure trove of Bergapunk. He was wrapped in bandages and his face was pale. It seems that even if you use an iron block, getting punched by yourself is not very comfortable. Shut up, Ronald. This is the doctor's decision, what you should do is choose to comply, the Major General scolded loudly. Colonel Ronald's expression was extremely angry, and Bright saw the muscles on his face trembling. Finally, he nodded and said, yes. It seems that the authority of Bergapunk at this base is somewhat exaggerated. But that's also true. Here, it's the Science Army. Ronald, send this guy back. The Major General withdrew his sword from its sheath and gave Brett a cold glance. It seems that a pair of handcuffs alone cannot lock him, so let's add a few more, he said. Brett looked at Colonel Ronald, whose expression suddenly became excited, and couldn't help but sigh in his heart that this Major General was not really indifferent. It seems there will be a little trouble next. Yes. Please hand it over to me, General. Ronald nodded excitedly, waved his hand and approached with a few navies, directly pulling out new handcuffs and ankle shackles that had already been prepared for Brett. No one would think that Brett could escape smoothly, it was just a matter of time before he was caught back. Brett did not resist, but instead took the initiative to extend his hand. Since it has been decided to stay, such a situation was already anticipated. The sailors put on new handcuffs and ankle shackles for Brett and added 3 pairs each in one breath. Brett didn't care too much because the Navy didn't know he was a capable person, so they wouldn't give him the shackles of Shanghai Tower stone. These shackles were nothing to him at this time. Remember to bring him over tomorrow, it's time to add some experimental materials, Bergapunk said casually. Yes, Doctor. The colonel nodded and then placed his hand on the hilt of his sword at his waist, his eyes filled with coldness. It's time to go back, Fishman. You don't need me to tie a chain around your neck and lead you, do you? Brett tugged at the corner of his mouth and said, then lead the way, humans. So, Major General Hagrid, Doctor, I'll take him back first. Ronald leaned slightly, then turned around and left. Brett followed up without making any eye contact with Bergapunk throughout the journey. I should go back to sleep too. Bergapunk stretched lazily. Please rest well. Major General Hag respectfully said, just leave the remaining finishing work to me and it won't affect your future research. Then please trouble you. Vegapunk yawned and left unsteadily. When he turned his back to the Navy, the corner of his mouth curved slightly. Watching Bergapunk leave, Rear Admiral Hagrid called in a navy and said, "Send more people to keep an eye on that kid. Today's situation must not have a second chance." Yes. The Major General's eyes were cold. Although he had brought that kid back, the chaos tonight wouldn't have happened before. Damn Fishman. Bright began his return journey surrounded by a group of navies, and he also enjoyed a round-robin treatment. However, the navy in front always turned around and looked at him with a resentful gaze, not to mention the gaze behind him. If his gaze could be lethal, Brett felt like he had been beaten into a honeycomb. Of course, the line of sight ultimately has no killing power, only weapons have it. So the navies only glared angrily at Brett, but the guns aimed at him did not fire, and the swords pointed at him did not chop down. They seemed to be enduring very hard. Bright thought so, he couldn't even turn his head, and the blade and muzzle almost hit him in the face. This base is really big, and Brett's escape route was far away, so it took some time to go back. By the time he returned to the familiar prison, it was already around midnight. The doors of the prison haven't even closed yet, just like when Brett left before. Brett is ready to rest in the prison. But you wouldn't think today's matter ended like this, would you, Fishman? The sailors did not let go and still surrounded Brett in the middle. Colonel Ronald stood in front of Brett, and Brett glanced down. The man's hand tightly grasped the hilt of the sword at his waist. You wouldn't think you could go back to sleep with peace of mind after causing so much casualties, would you? The faces of the navy were filled with anger, and with just a command, they would probably launch a massive attack on Brett. "I'm sorry," Bright just replied. "It's just a pity that someone has died. But I don't think my actions are wrong. In terms of stance, the navy is the enemy." Regret. Ronald gritted his teeth, released the hilt of his sword, clenched his fists tightly, and said, "That's right, I'm really stupid. What's the use of saying these things to a cold-blooded beast like you?" He tugged at his suit tie and said coldly, "Let's use a simpler method, a method that even fish can remember with their bodies, to make you understand how much sin you have committed." Bright's eyes drooped and he said, "I advise you not to. It's too late to beg for mercy now. No one can save you." Ronald roared angrily, "Get him for me." The navy, who had already been unable to hold back, rushed towards Bright in an instant. Now is the time to make Brett pay the price. Thanks for the 100 points reward from the Cat's Hot Dry Noodles boss. Thank you, thank you. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Warning and Visitors. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7 Warning and Visitors. In just an instant, Bright fell into the predicament of being surrounded by the navy. Although the navies were hesitant about Bergapunk's orders and did not use weapons, Brett himself put on shackles again, and the situation remained overwhelmingly unfavorable for him. Actually, Brett can understand the anger of the navy. The people who died today and were injured because of him are comrades in arms and friends of the navy. It is natural for them to feel angry. Unfortunately, such understanding is meaningless. In many cases, people don't do things because they want to do them. Positions, interests, emotions, and other factors are like threads, pulling people like puppets to act involuntarily. Brett understood the anger of the navy very well, but he didn't intend to be beaten like this. So in the moment when the navy rushed forward and wanted to directly press him to the ground, he had already slightly lowered his body, his leg muscles were tense, and more water began to flow into his legs. The sole of the shark's palm. The bent legs instantly straightened, and an explosive force acted on the ground, directly causing Brett's tall body to collide like a locomotive. Anyway, let's get out of the situation of being surrounded first. Although wearing ankle shackles is not enough to take a big step, just a small step is enough now. No navy could stop him at all, and all the navy blocking the way ahead were scattered like bowling pins. For a moment, the outside of this cell was filled with screams of agony. Damn it! Colonel Ronald let out a furious shout, his feet ghostly stomping on the ground. Shave! Moon step. Just as Brett slowed down, Ronald appeared above and behind him. Lan Jiao. The colonel's body suddenly twisted in mid-air, his right leg forming a sharp trajectory like a sickle, and he swung straight towards Brett's shoulder. Far from being as fast as that Major General. Bright thought to himself and raised his hands. When? A loud bang. Ronald's right foot struck hard on the chain between Brett's hands. The colonel's powerful and heavy foot made the tense chain creak and bend downwards, even causing Brett's arm to bend slightly. However, it has been proven that the specially made alloy handcuffs at this base are of excellent quality, and the chains have not suffered any damage. What? Ronald widened his eyes. So easily blocked his own blow, this guy's power. Brett didn't give Ronald any time to panic. He grabbed his leg with both hands and pulled forward. Mr. Colonel's body instantly lost control, and his gaze rapidly shifted as he was lifted upside down by Brett. What I advise you not to do is, Bright said calmly, don't continue to anger me. Ronald gritted his teeth and kicked his other leg towards Bright. But before that, Bright had already swung him up. Like waving a whip, Brett vividly swung Colonel Ronald into a coherent circle. Then, he looked at the navy behind him. Aim and let go. In the next moment, the shell comes out of the barrel. Boom. The shell pierced through the crowded navy. That terrifying force was simply beyond the navy's ability to resist, and it was scattered again after being hit. And Ronald himself even ran through the ranks of the navy, slamming heavily into the corner wall further back, accompanied by a muffled thud. Wow. Ronald lay on the ground, struggling to lift his head. His face was full of disbelief, but there was no time to say anything. A mouthful of blood had already spurted out of his mouth, and he collapsed to the ground with only the strength to stare. The remaining navies remained silent like cicadas. Without exception, his face was filled with a look of fear. Colonel Ronald, who has mastered the 4 and 6 styles, surprisingly lost so easily. Brett breathed a slow sigh of relief. The strength is much greater than before. Just eating the fruit without exerting the ability to receive such reinforcement. Phantom creatures, they are truly terrifying. Or perhaps the bloodline factor of Kaido has also taken effect. In that case, I'm looking forward to it. How strong will one become after fully exerting one's abilities? Bright thought this way and walked slowly back. Seeing him coming over, the navy instinctively dodged on both sides, desperately leaning against the wall, trying to stay as far away as possible from Bright. Of course, there are also many people who, even full of fear, still stop in front of Bright. Don't try to be reckless. Fishman. They roared angrily, have you forgotten your situation? Brett ignored them at all, bypassed them on his own, then turned around and walked into the familiar prison, casually closing the door. The navies looked at each other. Then in the next moment, they all breathed a sigh of relief. Hurry up, lock the door. Hurry up and lock the door. Don't let him come out again. Go and see how Colonel Ronald is doing. Brett didn't care that the door of the cell was locked again. Sweating profusely, he decided to take a shower. Cold water poured on him, and Bright began to summarize what had happened tonight. If Bega Punk's promise is true, he will surely win thoroughly tonight. The pirated phantom beast species that includes the Kaido bloodline factor has made a qualitative leap in strength compared to before. Not only is there an immediate increase in combat power, but after integrating the bloodline factors of Kaido, the potential of the body has greatly increased. Even if Vegapunk's research is completed, the potential may rise to an incredible level in one breath. But is that guy Vegapunk really trustworthy? Brett looked up and let the water wash away the stain on his face. I have to believe it now. Turning off the water, Brett wiped away the water stains on his face, his expression somewhat depressed. Why is a scientist so strong? Brett recalled the moment before, when Vegapunk smiled and pressed his hand on his shoulder, making him feel like he was pressed against a mountain and unable to break free. Not a match for that guy at all. Bright realized this. Like Gotzi, Caesar, and Quinn, Bega Punk is not a weak scientist either. As that guy said, whether he wants it or not, he can only stay to cooperate with his research. Anyway, this is the only way now. Brett lay back in bed. Let's go straight when the boat reaches the bridgehead. After a tense night, Bright quickly fell asleep. I didn't sleep for too long this night. In his sleep, Bright suddenly heard a loud noise and woke up in shock. He flipped over and stood up, but before he could do anything, he was hit directly by a force against the wall. Then, the sharp blade almost pressed against Brett's right pupil. The Major General I met last night now appeared in the prison with an angry expression on his face. He pressed Brett's shoulder with his left hand and pressed him against the wall, holding a sword in his right hand, with the tip of the sword almost piercing Brett's pupils. Well done, Fishman. You've sent many idiots to the medical department again. The words of the Major General named Hag were filled with anger. You guy, do you want me to slice you into sashimi? Brett didn't speak. At this critical moment, he surprisingly had some strange emotions. These people did not deliberately use discriminatory language to provoke his anger. For them, these words were just a convention, taken for granted, and blurted out. A very helpless reality. While daydreaming, Bright calmly said, Do you want to go against Bega Punk's will, General? The Major General clicked and said, You'd better pray that the doctor's research can last a little longer, Fishman, so that you can be arrogant for a while longer. At least during this period when I can be arrogant, right? Brett casually raised his hand and flicked away the Brigadier's sword, his eyes fixed on the Brigadier's eyes, and his tone was impeccable. Hagrid's cheeks twitched for a moment, and then he said coldly, Anyway, give me some peace, Fishman. If you dare to cause trouble again, even if the doctor gets angry, I will kill you. What you need to do is to properly restrain the Navy. Brett directly pushed the man away and casually said, I'm too lazy to cause trouble for myself. Humph, I'll keep an eye on you. The Major General withdrew his sword and sheathed it. Let's go and see the doctor. Bright did not refuse. Silently following this man all the way to Bergapunk's laboratory, after opening the door, Brett saw an unexpected person. Oh, hello everyone. Bright's pupils suddenly contract. Thank you for the 500-point reward from the boring cold and black boss. Thank you, thank you. Green Bull actually went to find Wang Lufei. Perhaps the battle of the General Emperor, which has lasted for more than a decade, is finally coming to an end. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Yellow Ape, Research Begins. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8 Yellow Ape, Research Begins. The man lazily leaned against the clean laboratory wall, with a gray top hat hanging from his fingers, spinning around. He is shorter than Brett, but his physique is more slender. He wears a pair of sunglasses on his forehead and a leisurely smile on his face. If it weren't for him wearing a coat of justice, people who see him would probably take him for granted as a traveler rather than a high-ranking official in the Navy. Mr. Polyasolino. Why did you come? The Brigadier General, who was still cold in front of Brett just now, was a bit panicked. Didn't you already transfer to G.5 base? Brett's expression also became solemn in sync. Of course, he couldn't possibly not know the man in front of him. The man's name is Polyasolino, a Rear Admiral in the Navy headquarters. A man who will soon receive the title of Admiral of the Navy headquarters. He is also the culprit who appears here now. But as Hagrid said, hasn't he already been transferred? There's nothing I can do. I haven't stepped down from my position here yet. The Yellow Ape said with a worried expression, I don't want to come over either, but Mr. Kong is very angry about what happened here. You know, Hagrid, it's about Dr. Bergapunk. There won't be any carelessness on it, so let me come over and take a look. Major General Hagrid's face turned pale. Sure enough, the higher-ups are very dissatisfied with him. It's all because of this damn fish man. Anger and hatred, the two most malicious emotions, surged in my heart as never before. It was my carelessness that gave this guy an opportunity to take advantage of, Hagrid said solemnly. Please rest assured that this kind of thing will never happen again. Oh. Isn't it great to have such determination? The yellow ape put his hat on his head and walked over, patting Hagrid's shoulder with a contented look. Keep it up, he said. Yes. Hagrid nodded heavily and breathed a sigh of relief in his heart. Lieutenant General Poliusolino was not here to send him to military court. However, even so, my impression in the minds of my superiors has definitely been damaged. Thinking of this, the Major General's heart was shrouded in a layer of gloom. Damn fish man. In short, I will stay here temporarily until the new base commander is transferred. The yellow ape sighed and said, after turning around, I finally came back here. He looked at Bright and said, little brother, what a big commotion. It's like complaining to friends after work. Brett pursed his lips. I will never forget the shimmering light in the sky at that time. This is the opponent that I cannot match at this moment, the monster among the real monsters. However, he actually wants to return to this base. Is there no problem with the transaction with Vegapunk? I have already heard the doctor talk about everything. Don't be so naughty again in the future. Otherwise, it would be very dangerous, said the yellow ape with his hands on his hips and a serious expression. His tone is very gentle, even considered kind, and his words are very peaceful. However, at this moment, Brett felt his hair stand on end. The heart seemed to be held by an invisible hand, no longer able to beat. In just an instant, sweat had already soaked Brett's prison uniform. All right, Poliusolino, don't scare him. I'm going to start the experiment. Another voice sounded. It's Vegapunk. This laboratory is very spacious, with many equipment that Brett doesn't understand. At this moment, Vegapunk is sitting in front of a computer typing the keyboard with a clattering sound. I'm just chatting with this young man. The yellow ape replied with a smile. The pressure on his body dissipated instantly, and Brett was finally able to breathe smoothly. What was that just now? It's not domineering, it's just a simple oppression of momentum. What a monster. You can chat anytime you want, it's my time now. Vegapunk stood up and walked over, shaking his head in head. Of course, your research is more important, Doctor. Mr. Kong and the government are both looking forward to your achievements, said Huang Huan without questioning. Hagrid, let's go out first and don't disturb the doctor's experiment. Major General Hagrid hesitated and said, but Mr. Poliusolino, will this kid be alone with the doctor? Don't worry, doctor will not have any problems. The yellow ape casually waved his hands and said, moreover, I have already specifically reminded the little brother that he will definitely be obedient, right? The last sentence was spoken to Bright. Brett fell silent for a moment and said, so far, I don't need to trouble myself. Look, isn't this very good? Yellow Ape said with a smile, and don't underestimate Doctor. Hagrid could only nod to show understanding. The two of them turned around and walked towards the door. When they reached the door, the yellow ape suddenly turned around. By the way, he looked at Brett, I haven't seen you for over 3 months. Your aura has improved a lot, little brother. Have you never given up exercising? It's a good habit. Brett turned his back to him, his expression completely tense. Is it seeing and hearing? How could this guy be so sharp? But please remember what I just said. The sound of the door closing behind him, and the yellow ape finally went out. Bright couldn't help but take a long sigh of relief. That guy is putting too much pressure on himself. The feeling of life and death being in the hands of others is really uncomfortable. Ha ha ha, are you scared, kid? Vegapunk chuckled with schadenfreude as he stepped aside and began tinkering with some equipment. Be careful in the future, Poliusolino, that guy is not easy, he said. Brett took a breath to calm down. Of course, he was aware of this matter. The yellow ape was a top-notch monster on the sea, deserving of all the battles. He was a true powerhouse with strength, willpower, and experience. I don't feel like I've reached the point where someone like that needs to be constantly vigilant, Bright said calmly. Are yellow apes wary of themselves? Of course there is. But it's probably not too much. What truly deserves that guy's vigilance, at least at the level of 7 Marshall Seas, right? The yellow ape's vigilance towards itself is at most a reminder to be careful when it sees a pit on the ground, right? Ha ha ha, do you have some self-awareness, kid? Bega Punk laughed heartily, but you don't have to worry too much. Porcelino won't be here for long. The Admiral of the Navy is about to change his position, and that guy is also going to be promoted to the rank of general. The government will not let his enormous combat power roam freely here. The new base commander should already be on his way over. Are the new 3 major players coming on stage? So the Navy is also about to usher in a new era. Alright, kid, it doesn't matter how much you think. With me around, you won't be okay. Come on, let me thoroughly examine your body first, Bega Punk said with a smile. Okay. Bright nodded. At this point, we can only choose to believe him, right? Great. First, you need to analyze your bloodline thoroughly, and then you can start selecting the appropriate bloodline factor. At the same time, outside the door, the yellow ape yawned and said, really, I rushed over early in the morning and didn't sleep well at all. Major General Hagrid said with great insight, Mr. Porcelino, then you can go rest first. I'll just watch from here. Oh. Then it's up to you. The yellow ape didn't refuse either. He smiled and said, you should take good care of that little fish man, Hagrid. Yes. Hagrid nodded solemnly, please leave it to me. No, what I mean is, keep an eye on him from now on. The yellow ape said leisurely, really, is the giant-toothed shark like Fishman really so talented? Hagrid paused for a moment, then. I understand now, until the end of the doctoral experiment, I will keep an eye on him. The yellow ape nodded lightly, that's enough, isn't it? Thank you for the 1500-point reward from Thulhuelder, thank you. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. First Blood Fusion. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9 First Blood Fusion. Brett didn't stay in Bergpunk's laboratory for long. Bergpunk checked his body, drew a tube of fresh blood, and then sent him back. It's not a good thing that they've been together for too long. When Brett pushed the door open and walked out of the laboratory, he found that the yellow ape was no longer there, and only Major General Hagrid was still waiting for him here. Hagrid said nothing and silently escorted Brett back to prison. Of course, Brett had nothing to say to this Major General. After sending Brett back to the prison and closing the door with his own hands, Hagrid called for a navy. Go to my room and office, move my bed and desk over. From now on, he will never give this jerk a chance again. Brett was unaware that there was an extra guard outside his prison gate. But even if he knew about it, he wouldn't care. The prison has installed surveillance phone worms to constantly monitor his movements. No matter how many people are outside, what is it? Brett sat by the bed in silence. It's really embarrassing. I couldn't even catch my breath in front of the yellow ape just now. The feeling of powerlessness from the last arrest reappeared in my heart. It's too weak. It's still too weak. This world is different from the past. This vast expanse of blue Qinghai has never been gentle, only strength can withstand the fierce winds and rains of this vast sea. We need to become stronger. At least, one must also have the power to stand tall and speak in front of monsters like the yellow ape. Brett took a deep breath, so let's start exercising. Immediately, Bright stood up and began doing push-ups. The potential of the body needs time to grow and be stimulated, but Bright believes that active exercise should also accelerate this process. Bright began to sweat profusely. Time passed by little, and Brett only did 3 things a day: eat, sleep, and exercise. Perhaps the fusion of Kaido bloodline factors has indeed begun to take effect, and Brett can feel himself slowly becoming stronger every day. Strength, stamina, and defense are all gradually improving. Brett actually really wants to test his abilities, but now is not the time. After all, he is constantly exposed to naval surveillance. I can only focus on working hard to exercise my body. Apart from exercising, the only thing that Brett can consider serious is to provide him with fresh blood and hair when Vegapunk's materials are depleted. As expected before, the yellow ape never appeared in front of him again, as if he didn't exist at all. As the true core senior management of the Navy, there are more significant things that he needs to consider. This is certainly a good thing for Brett, but the feeling of being ignored is also somewhat subtle. However, although the yellow ape did not care about Brett, a major general named Hagrid was constantly blocking the outside of the cell. Brett was surprised when he first saw his bed and desk outside the door. That man didn't give Brett any chance. He was always by Brett's side except in Vegapunk's laboratory. It may sound serious, but in reality, it's not a big deal. After all, Brett spent most of his time in prison, and the time he would be followed by this guy was between going back and forth to the laboratory. Bright quickly got used to this guy's presence. One day, when Bright was going to provide blood to Vegapunk as usual, Vegapunk told him that the yellow ape had been transferred and there was a new base commander at the base, who was also a lieutenant general from the Navy headquarters. Brett felt a little emotional as the man he was full of fear quietly left without causing any trouble in his life. Perhaps it's because in the eyes of the yellow ape, having a major general staring at him is already more than enough, isn't it? Brett met a new lieutenant general one day while visiting the Vegapunk laboratory. That is a man who has never appeared in the original work, about 60 or 70 years old, with hair and beard all white. He should be a naval elder from the same period as the Warring States Kapazurfa. Perhaps because he was already old, he had no interest in Brett and had never seen him again since that time. Everything was calm, and it took about 4 months. Suddenly one day, Vegapunk called Brett into the laboratory. "Ha ha ha, finally cracked successfully." Vegapunk's face was full of excitement. "Your Fishman bloodline factor is indeed much more complex than humans. Even I have spent so much time on it," he said. "So, can we start working on the truly crucial part now?" said Brett, feeling a little excited. "Now, you can start choosing the bloodline you want." Vegapunk brought Brett to the front of a computer. Brett looked at the computer screen and saw a dense array of pictures of fish. From the infinitely distant past to the present, all the fish that were born in the sea, all your ancestors, some of whom may also be our ancestors, are here. Upon hearing Vegapunk's words, Brett whispered, "So, does ancient and present overlap at this moment?" "There hasn't been any overlap yet, but it's almost there." Vegapunk couldn't suppress the smile on his face. "So, Doctor, can you choose as many as you want?" Bright couldn't help but smile. "Ha ha ha, that's a great idea, but the ability cannot accommodate too many different lineage factors, even if these lineage factors come from within your own body." Vegapunk smiled and said, "But there's no need to make all the choices yet. Let's choose one first and try it out. Experiment." "Why does it sound unreliable?" Bright couldn't help but ask, carrying. "What does this mean?" "You can understand it as me attaching bloodline factors to abilities," Vegapunk said casually. "Completely incomprehensible. But it should be a very impressive technology." As Brett browsed through the numerous fish on the screen, he asked, "But Doctor, how are you going to explain to the government?" "What, are you afraid that I'll reveal this experiment to the government, kid?" Vegapunk glanced at Brett. "Don't worry, I don't have any plans to cause trouble on my own." He stretched lazily, almost pressing the back of his head to the ground, making Brett worried that his waist would break. "At the same time, there is another project in progress, a fish-human bloodline fusion experiment, artificially creating a plan for warriors with fish-human power. The government is very interested in it. Brett asked, so why not just recruit Fishman soldiers directly? Vegapunk straightened up and yawned, there's no need to ask such foolish questions. Bright couldn't help but smile and shake his head, yes, stupid question. Doctor, I have chosen it. Bright pointed to a picture on the screen and said, how about this one? Not bad, simple, but useful enough, Vegapunk said as he leaned over to take a look, give me 1 week's time. In Brett's anticipation, a week quickly passed. Brett was once again called to Vegapunk's laboratory. Then, Vegapunk threw over a fruit that looked a bit familiar. This. Bright looked at the fruit in his hand with some surprise. The fiery red color and layered scaly skin. Isn't this the fruit he ate before? Eat it, kid, the bloodline you have chosen is within this fruit, Vegapunk said with a smile. Bright is very confused. What's going on here? Thank you to the book enthusiast 20203241355000767 for his 200-point reward, thank you to the Fulhuelder for his 1500-point reward, thank you to both of you. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Success, Selection of Bloodline. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10 Success, Selection of Bloodline. The fruit on my hand is exactly the same as the one I ate before. Doctor, Brett couldn't help but ask, did you make a replica of the Qinglong fruit again? But this time it contains another bloodline factor. What stupid words to say, Vegapunk lazily collapsed on the spacious chair, closing his eyes and lazily saying, the fruit you ate is unique. I can replicate as many bloodline factors as I want, but my ability to replicate one is already my limit. What does it mean? Is the material for replicating the Qinglong fruit gone? Is it enough to replicate only one from start to finish? Or rather, although Vegapunk broke the unique law of devil fruit, he couldn't cross too much. It's really amazing, devil fruit. What kind of existence is the so-called ability? What form does it exist in the human body? Why can eating just one fruit give people all kinds of magical abilities? Why is it that after the death of a capable person, the ability will be stripped from the corpse and then reborn on a random fruit in this world? Brett is really curious about the secret of devil fruit. Unfortunately, the only person in the world who may have mastered this secret, Vegapunk, had no intention of decrypting it for him. The function of this fruit is to add new abilities or activate dormant bloodline factors in your body based on the previous fruit, said Vegapunk. Brett understood a bit. For example, if the ability of the replicated Qinglong fruit is the essence of the game, then this fruit is mod. Give it a try, kid, Vegapunk sat up with a look of excitement in his eyes, it should satisfy you. Blaze nodded, and indeed there was no need for hesitation. He was mentally prepared, and the taste of the last fruit is still fresh in his memory to this day. Opening his mouth, Bright bit off most of the fruit in one bite. Unexpectedly, although the taste was still unpleasant, it was still much more delicious compared to the last fruit. Brett no longer procrastinated and swallowed the remaining small half of the fruit in one gulp. Is that enough? He asked. Okay. Vegapunk nodded and said, next, just wait for it to mature slowly. Can't we see any results now? Bright was somewhat disappointed. It's like in a game where you get a top-notch weapon but can't pick it up due to insufficient attributes, it feels very urgent. It has been said that the fusion and ability of bloodline factors are different, don't expect immediate results. You can understand it as your body gradually producing a new organ, and of course, it takes time to get from scratch, said Vegapunk in a sullen tone. Brett said clearly, got it, and after the organ is formed, you still need to exercise it, right? Even guys like Kaido and Charlotte Lingling never stopped exercising and fighting when they were young, Vegapunk said naturally. It should take a few days to take effect. You can go back first and think about what kind of bloodline you need. See you in a week. Bright nodded. This really needs to be carefully considered. So, doctor, how many bloodlines do I need to think about? Bright asked the key question. Bergapunk extended his hands and then bent his left thumb and index finger one by one. Oh. 8, that's about all the limits, right? Is there so much? On the way back, the excitement in Brett's heart had not yet dissipated. If there are still 8 positions left, that is to say, adding the bloodline factor of Kaido and the one just obtained, there are a total of 10 types. Brett even thought it might be a bit too cheating. No matter what I think about it, it's just the ability that a creature possesses, and it's still far inferior to the ability of a demonic fruit. But it's already enough. If the quality doesn't match, we'll use quantity to make up for it, right? Major General Hagrid, who had been following Brett all along, frowned. How did he feel that the fisherman was very happy today? Did Dr. Bega say something to him? Without a word, Brett returned to the prison and began his routine exercise without stopping. Time is also passing by bit. When 4 days had passed, Brett felt that time was almost over, so he planned to give it a try. Try the fruit you ate 4 days ago to see if it really works. He chose to lie quietly on the side of the bed in the quiet late night, turning off the lights. As for the method of the experiment, it was very simple. After making sufficient mental preparations, he took a hard bite on his tongue. Sharp teeth that were easily enough to crush steel directly carved out several bloody large holes on the soft tongue. Brett's muscles were all tense throughout his body, and his tongue was covered in the nervous system, which was very sensitive. He bit down with a heart-wrenching pain. If it weren't for the constant surveillance inside the prison, he wouldn't want to bite his tongue. Blood kept seeping out of the wound, and Brett could only swallow his own blood in his mouth. Fortunately, the amount of bleeding is not too large, and I can barely tolerate it. However, the bleeding did not last long, and Brett felt that the wound was no longer bleeding. And as time passed, the pain also gradually subsided. In about 2 hours, the deep wound on the tongue that was bitten has initially healed, and after 3 hours, it has fully recovered. Successful. Bright was convinced in his heart. The first bloodline ability he selected came from a type of ancient sea cucumber, which provided resilience. Although it may seem like it took several hours just to recover from a bite on the tongue, it is not very powerful. However, according to Bergapunk, sea cucumbers have the powerful ability to regrow even if half of their body is bitten off by an enemy, as long as they are not dead. Brett's life goal is to live well in this chaotic world, and his ability to recover cannot be denied. The first activation of bloodline factors excited Brett's heart. In that case, perhaps one will become an incredible powerhouse in the future. In the darkness, Bright couldn't help but smile. But instead of fantasizing, it's better to think carefully about what other abilities you need. Firstly, of course, the basic values include defense, strength, and stamina, right? Although the potential of combining Kaido's bloodline factors with one's own bloodline should already be exaggerated, why not make them more powerful? Basic values are the most important. Then you can consider bloodlines that can complement your abilities, such as flames, thunder, and gusts. Well, we can't just consider combat-related issues. Perhaps we can also solve the problem of not being able to swim ourselves. Brett pondered seriously for 3 days. The agreed time has arrived. Thank you for the 100-point reward from the system expert, thank you for the 1500-point reward from the Shitsuan expert, and thank you for the generosity of the 2 experts. End of this chapter.